For those who come here seeking God, may God go with you. For those who come embracing life, may life return your affections. And for those who come to seek a path, may a way be found, and the courage to take it step by step. This morning's reading is an excerpt from Rachel Naomi Raymond's book, My Grandfather's Blessings. It's a portion of the essay in that book from which the title is taken. She writes, "On Friday afternoons, when I would arrive at my grandfather's house after school, the tea would already be set on the kitchen table. My grandfather had his own way of serving tea. There were no teacups and saucers or bowl of granulated sugar or honey. Instead, he would pour the tea directly from the silver samovar into a drinking glass. There had to be a teaspoon in the glass first, otherwise the glass, being thin, might break. My grandfather did not drink his tea in the same way that the parents of my friends did either. He would put a cube of sugar between his teeth and then drink the hot tea straight from his glass. So would I. I much preferred drinking tea this way to the way I had to drink tea at home. After we had finished our tea, my grandfather would set 2 candles on the table and light them. Then he would have a word with God in Hebrew. Sometimes he would speak out loud, but often he would close his eyes and be quiet. I knew then that he was talking to God in his heart. I would sit and wait patiently because the best part of the week was coming. When Grandpa finished talking to God, he would turn to me and say, 'Come, Neshumle.' It was his pet name for me, and it meant beloved little soul. Then I would stand in front of him, and he would rest his hands lightly on top of my head. He would begin by thanking God for me and for making him my grandpa. He would specifically mention my struggles during that week and tell God something about me that was true. Each week, I would wait to find out what that was. If I had made mistakes during the week, he would mention my honesty in telling the truth. If I had failed, he would appreciate how hard I tried. If I had taken even a short nap without my nightlight, he would celebrate my bravery in sleeping in the dark. Then he would give me his blessing and ask the long-ago women I knew from his stories, Sarah, Rachel, Rebecca, and Leah, to watch over me. These few moments were the only time in my week that I felt completely safe and at rest. My family of physicians and health professionals were always struggling to learn more and to be more. It seemed there was always more to know. It was never enough. If I brought home a 98 on a test from school, my father would ask, "And what happened to the other 2 points?" I pursued those 2 points relentlessly throughout my childhood. But my grandfather did not care about such things. For him, I was already enough, and somehow when I was with him, I knew with absolute certainty that this was so. Words of Rachel Naomi Raymond. Let me say at the outset that we have no idea why Cayman Naib took his own life earlier this month. From what the public has been told, he left no note, no postings on social media, no evidence of what drove the middle school boy to grab his father's gun, to run out into the cold rain that evening and to put an end to what appeared by all accounts, at least outwardly, to be a bright future. So while circumstances surrounding Cayman's tragic death provide the jumping off point for what I want to say today, I want to be clear that we will likely never know what pushed Cayman over the edge. And before I go on, I also want to express my heartfelt condolences to Cayman's parents and his sister, to the community of the Shipley School that he attended, and to all those who still grieve and mourn for his loss. It has been reported in the news that shortly before Cayman committed suicide, he received an email from his school about an incomplete assignment. There is speculation, and it's only speculation, that this email was the proverbial straw that broke the camel's back and that compelled Cayman to do what he did. The speculation leads us, or at least it leads me, to consider how we are raising our children and the culture we are creating for their future. We heard a few minutes ago from Riley, who is one of the many outstanding youth we have here at the church, what life is like for a high school student these days. I'm going to offer a little bit more insight into what I've discovered since looking into this myself following Cayman's death. Out in Palo Alto, California, you may not know this, but between November of last year and this month, 4 high school students have committed suicide. And while, as in Cayman's death, we can't be certain of the reasons, the pressure cooker atmosphere of school seems to be at least a contributing factor. Carolyn Walworth, a high school junior, serves as a student representative to the Palo Alto School Board. She recently delivered a speech to the school board that was reprinted in the local community paper and which I found online. And while we don't live in Palo Alto, I believe her experience is representative of the students that I've spoken to about these issues and certainly reflect what Riley has offered today. So here are just some of the things that Carolyn told her school board just a few days ago. As I sit in my room staring at the list of colleges I've resolved to try to get into, trying to determine my odds of getting into each, I can't help but feel desolate. My stress began in elementary school, where students were segregated into separate class meetings as early and late readers. Although we were just elementary schoolers, we perceived this as a differentiation between the less and more advanced students, and either felt superior due to our intellect or shamed for a lack thereof. A month or two into my freshman year, I felt the pressure building. It crushes you on the inside to see what appears to be the majority of your classmates acing tests with flying colors while you're just doing all right. A piece of you cringes when you hear that your friend has been preparing for the SAT with classes since last summer and that they're already scoring a 2,000. And what about that freshman who mentioned he was already preparing to take his subject test at the end of the year? And the girl taking a summer immersion program to skip ahead and get into AP French her sophomore year? And that internship your best friend has with a Stanford professor? You can't help but slip into the system of competitive insanity related to college admissions to achieve social normalcy. You learn that it is okay and necessary to have great apprehension regarding your grades. You focus on getting straight A's. You go to bed at 1 a.m. every night, only to wake up a few hours later, earlier if you have morning practice for your sport, in an effort to get your excessive amount of homework finished each night. But at least you have the weekends to relax and pursue your own interests, right? Well, no. There's another surfeit of homework waiting for you on Friday night, plus SAT practice. Of course, we're expected to maintain a social life and spend adequate time with our families as well. Carolyn says, students are gasping for air, lacking the time to draw a measly breath in. We are not teenagers, she writes. We are lifeless bodies in a system that breeds competition, hatred, and discourages teamwork and genuine learning. We lack sincere passion. We are sick. Now that I am nearing the end of my academic career in Palo Alto, I'd like to nostalgically look back and remember how much fun I had growing up, learning, and being a teenager in our city. I'm sorry to say I won't be able to do that, even in the slightest degree. All of you who are parents of school-aged children can probably relate to Carolyn's experiences as you watch your own children struggle to keep up, as you and they both struggle to keep up with the tsunami of assignments that crashes down on them week after week. Then we compound all this with the pressure of standardized testing. Programs like No Child Left Behind and others on the state level, like the PSSAs here in our Commonwealth, have created a test-crazy culture. One report last year found that in an academic career from third grade to the end of high school, students will take an average of 113 standardized tests. 113 standardized tests. This same study found that students in grades 3 through 8 take an average of 10, and in some school districts as many as 20 standardized tests each year. 10 to 20 each year. And that's in addition to the pop quizzes, the midterms, the finals that each teacher imposes on our children and youth. And with its upcoming Keystone exams, Pennsylvania is among at least 36 states that require or plan to require high school end-of-course exams in a variety of subjects as a condition of graduation. Preparing for, taking, and retaking these standardized assessments not only eats into valuable class time, but it layers stress upon stress, anxiety upon anxiety for our children. And of course, we know that the stress and anxiety don't come to a blessed end when the kids graduate from high school or even college. When we pause to take a look at our own lives, at our culture of consumption and achievement, at simply the myriad of choices we face every day when we walk into the average supermarket, we realize that anxiety is in the very air that we breathe. Stress is the water that we're swimming in. Every year, the American Psychological Association conducts something of a stress test in American culture in which it evaluates the levels of stress that we face. The latest assessment found that nearly half of all Americans suffer from some form of chronic stress. Just a couple years ago, following its study in 2013, the APA declared that chronic stress, which it defines as stress that interferes with our ability to function normally over an extended period, that chronic stress is a public health crisis and that America is at a critical crossroads when it comes to stress and our health. Money, work, and the state of the economy are the biggest stressors in our lives, followed closely by family responsibilities, relationships, and health concerns. Instead of making our lives easier, technology seems to be contributing to our stress and anxiety levels. The magazine Corporate Wellness, reporting on the phenomenon of cultural stress, tells us that the, quote, freedom to work and communicate anywhere, anytime, 24 hours a day keeps America the land of the constantly logged-on workforce. Americans, it tells us, work longer hours than nearly anyone in the developed world, including Japan. For many professionals, the 40-hour work week is history. 60 to 80-hour work weeks are now the norm. This same magazine tells us that Americans leave a massive 169 million vacation days unused every year, and that the amount of vacation we take now is at a 40-year low. While there are many reasons we don't take all the vacation that we're owed, principal among them are stress about falling behind and anxiety over being replaced. I would be shocked if anyone was shocked by any of this in the room, because we live this every day, don't we? Right? And I'm sure you didn't need to come to church today to be told how stressed and anxious you are. But as the first song that Denise sang told us, it's not just about us, it's about what we're teaching our children. And not just what we're teaching them in our classrooms, but by how we live our lives. We need to teach our children well, as the song goes, and I'm afraid that we as a culture are failing them. When school children are killing themselves because, at least in part, they are afraid of falling behind or not getting into the best colleges or letting down their parents, it's time to sit up and take notice. If this is the year of the child in our church, as we've declared it to be, when a youth in our own community takes his own life, we've got to stop and pay attention and ask why. Perhaps Cayman had mental health issues unrelated to stress. Maybe he had significant conflicts within his family. Perhaps he experienced rejection from someone to whom he was attracted. Maybe he was bullied at school. But whether or not any of these things led Cayman to do what he did, we can't deny that we are creating an atmosphere of achievement and excellence for our children that is unhealthy and perhaps even pathological. It is killing our children, and it's killing us physically, emotionally, spiritually. I don't claim to have the answer to this problem, and as Riley alluded, it's complex and it's big. And it's going to require a shift in our culture and our ethos. But I think that there's a way to begin to push back, if just a little bit. And it's captured in one word. It's a word that you heard in our reading this morning, the story of how, as a young girl, Rachel Naomi Raymond would be blessed by her grandfather. Remember how she wrote, "For my grandfather I was already enough. And somehow when I was with him, I knew with absolute certainty that this was so." And so that single word, enough, is what we are called to reclaim today. While society pushes all of us to be not just good, but great, it's time to say that good enough is enough. That we are enough, that our children are enough, that we are blessed and that we are a blessing. That our children are entitled to be children, that we, like them, are allowed to breathe, to play, to live life, to love life. We are entitled to that. I recently came across an article whose title kind of threw me for a loop. What did our parents always tell us? If a job is worth doing, it's worth doing well. The title of this article was, "If a job is worth doing, it's worth doing poorly." How about that? It's completely countercultural. The premise of the article is that if we are constantly seeking excellence, if we're always in search of the great, the wonderful, the perfect, we may miss out on opportunities to get something done, even if it's not done particularly well. In our culture, we fear failure, so we fail to act. So another way of putting this in this article, the message is, don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. Don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. I'm not promoting mediocrity in all things. I'm not suggesting that we become a nation of underachievers, but what I am offering up is that we be more selective in our striving and in our children's striving. We don't have to seek to be the best at everything all the time, nor do we have to impose that standard on our kids. In many things, good enough is good enough. This is what our Universalist heritage taught us and what the first principle of Unitarian Universalism tells us. We are all good enough. We are made good enough. We don't need to be the best, to be perfect in everything we do. We are allowed to be who we are, and we're not required to conform to some externally imposed, standardized, test-evaluated ideal. We are good enough. Our children are good enough. Now, I don't know whether hearing or growing up with and believing this message would have been enough to save Cayman, but perhaps it's enough to help some of us get through the day and help our children to do the same. This day and every day, I wish you peace. Amen.